realization of we are of nature, we are of the earth. Each one of us is of the earth, and this is why we call ourselves earthlings, I suppose. But this human condition identifies that nature intended us into our existence and into our resilience and into our full potential. And it's in this last 100 years where we've accelerated this march away from that nature and the convenience lifestyles and the technology boom and everything else. And this has been that pivot point of how did we lose health? We simply distanced ourselves from nature further than we'd ever been. And we did it at these fundamentals, as you point out, of the food system. And so that was my slippery slope into what's happened to the food, which took us into what happened to the soil, which has taken us into a realization of, oh my gosh, we became chemically dependent both in our farming practices and our pharmacy of the hospital. And when we took both of those industries and said we will technologically create a new chemical that will allow us to grow food better and be healthier, we lost our underpinnings. We lost the foundation of nutritional health on the planet and the vitality of humanity.
It's incredible, isn't it, that it feels like such small, simple changes, but then they achieve incredible scale, right? Like the idea of if you could find that to be the root, but the rate at which we've all been negatively impacted by it has been colossal. I guess right now, the individuals that are listening and all of us, it's kind of, we're in a challenging place because I think people want to be healthier, but they feel extremely conditioned by how they've been raised, how they grew up, the kinds of foods that they've been exposed to, the types of convenience, as you said, that they have already. And I find that that's probably one of the hardest things is habit change. Because like you said, we've marched so far away from being at one with the environment or being at one with the soil or being so close to our food. And now we're being so far away that it almost feels more abnormal to go back to nature because of the conditioning that exists. And so how difficult have you found it to help people actually reconnect with that which we've forgotten when that's actually who we were, if that makes sense?
I think it's almost impossible when you sit down with somebody in the construct of I'm going to prove to you that you're wrong. But it's incredibly easy to get there when you start in a state of compassion. Compassion is a much different energy than empathy. And I think we've lost compassion for our belief in empathy. Empathy is that effort to bring my energy, my vibration to your vibration, let you be the tuning fork because you might have just been diagnosed with a condition. If I sit down with a cancer patient, their vibration is in fear and maybe guilt and shame because they're going to leave their children behind at a young age or whatever it is. And so if I dive into empathy and try to match that vibration, we get stuck there. We get stuck in the fear, guilt, shame paradigm, and I'm suddenly steeped in fear of I don't think I'm equipped to help you free yourself of this disease. I think you are going to die. I think that and so I have these deep fears within me around the death of my patient, and they have that deep fear of death within themselves. And so that's typically where we go as humans right now, is we're taught that this empathic state of what is the vibration of the other person across from you? Can you match that? Therefore, you're in it together. Whereas compassion is a much different state of recognizing where they're at, listening to the song they're singing, but not becoming part of that symphony, and holding this other space, this other potential reality of, okay, yes, this has happened, but what is the alternative to it? And I think you lose that when you slip into that fear state, when you lose your creativity as soon as that fight or flight state kicks in on your sympathetic nervous system. The creative part of your brain shuts down when we stimulate the adrenal glands, which is, of course, what we're doing to our children with Adderall and all this. We stimulate with drugs those adrenal glands and they lose their creativity. So we have whole generations now that have been taught to answer multiple choice tests at the cost of their own creativity, and performance is linked to their adrenaline levels. That is basically the same thing that's happening in every doctor's office in the world, is the physician is afraid that they're not going to prevent death in this patient, and the patient is afraid that they are dying. And for all that fear of an endpoint, we can't imagine life as a continuum, as a continuing energetic event that's vital and constantly regenerating itself. A library of genetic potential. It's all of the viruses of the planet. It's a database. And those viruses are new potential genes waiting to be expressed by whatever life happens next. Right now in my body, there's 10 to the 15 viruses coursing through my bloodstream. It's 10 billion viruses in my bloodstream right now. Not the same viruses repeated, different viruses, 10 billion new genes checking in with every cell in my body to say, is this an opportunity? Is this an opportunity? Is this an opportunity? So as I let go of my own biology, if I let go of fear, guilt, and shame, is there a possibility for me to leap forward with my own biology, with the genes that are within me right now coursing through my bloodstream? Because I'm a microcosm of extinction and rebirth. And this is where medicine has really failed us, is it was a belief of scarcity rather than abundance, death rather than rebirth, fear of that everything was against us rather than perhaps everything is for us. And this has been that slippery journey for me of realizing at each turn I underestimated our potential, and we are sitting here at the pinnacle of a great rebirth of humanity if we choose to go that direction.
I guess if anyone's feeling that way on a personal level, where they're living in that scarcity, they're living in that fear, they're living in that insecurity and just challenge of, I don't know what to do, I don't know where to start, there's so many things that I need to sort out with my health, there's, I'm worried about, I keep hearing about my nervous system and the microbiome, and it just feels like overwhelming because we've been so uneducated and untrained in our bodies, right? It's almost like we've been given these bodies since we've been born, but we're so uneducated about how to use them and what they need and what's good for them and what's bad for them. And so if someone's feeling in a state of overwhelm, where do you suggest they begin?
We've been working for the last 15 years in our laboratory and in our clinics to sort out what's the simplest approach to beginning again. Because I think we really are at the end of physiology. When we see 2-year-olds with osteosarcoma, when we see 15-year-olds with, psychotic major depression, and when we see a 20-year-old with life-threatening autoimmune disease, all of these conditions are saying that we need a radical revolution. And so we've been working through all of the complexity of the diseases and the root causes and everything else to find that there's really 8 very basic things that start to build physiology from the ground up at the cell level and therefore at the organism level, and from the organism to the species. And those 8 things really revolve around some very basic lifestyle interventions, the first of which is coming out of fear. And so we spend the first segment of this process of finding self within the context of all the anxiety that you have, that you might feel like you're dying, that you feel like it's hopeless, feel like all the cards are stacked against you. How do we get out of that paradigm quickly? And that's an effort of really bringing the arrow inwards, because right now the medicine and the world at large are trying to point outside of you to say, there's your problem, there's your problem, there's your problem, there's your problem, there's your problem. So turning that arrow inward to say, where's my solution? And you and I talked about this briefly before the podcast started, of like, how did you know your journey? How did you get from North London to Los Angeles and everything in between? And you answered very beautifully. You said, I just listened to my intuition, and I never tried to judge it for did it make sense or not. And that's basically what's happened at our clinic, is we had to go inward and ask, where does this health come from? Because I wasn't trained into health, I was trained into disease management. And so as myself and my colleagues started to put that arrow inward, we found, wow, this is really exciting. It's super simple in the end. It's not 1,000 diseases against humans. It's one health waiting to emerge. And so as you come out of the fear paradigm and that external definition of self, and you become you, then your guide is your future self, your highest self, whatever is being expressed to make you alive today, with a self-identity, which is pretty bizarre. It's strange that you wake up every morning and you're Jay. It's strange that I haven't woken up and at some point thought, I'm Jay Shetty, because we're really the same thing. Like, we're same biology, same thing. I think I'm in Los Angeles. I could have bumped into the J wave very easily and been like, I'm Jay Shetty. And yet by biologic processes, that's your original math. That's the vibration you're going to follow. For me, that's the anatomy of the soul. A soul is something that has been captured by the religious world to describe the thing that will supersede your life. But on the science side, it is perhaps a great description of the energy field that allows you to organize in your mother's womb. At the beginning, you're one cell that starts to divide just like a tumor divides. And then suddenly around replication 260, you start to differentiate. And suddenly a cell becomes a kidney cell or a neurologic cell or whatever it's going to become. And not only does it become a unique cell, it knows where to migrate to in a 3-dimensional map to become that organ system. And we cannot find that map inside the human cell or in biology. That map seems to be in the physics field, which is to say in the electromagnetic field, which is to say in the space between everything. Your body, as solid as it appears to me right now, is 99.999% vacuum space, filled with an electromagnetic field, which is super dense, that organizes the reality of tissue around it. The solid is organized by the vacuum. And so that thing that organizes Jay Shetty every millionth of a second to reorganize itself, because you disappear and reappear constantly, approximately every millionth of a second, and you keep being you. You keep coming back every millionth of a second. So 1 million times a second, I'm remanifesting in front of you with a map from that electromagnetic field. So perhaps that's the anatomy of the soul. Perhaps that's the thing that holds the original you. And we have set this world up for dis-ease by convincing you're a whole bunch of identities outside of yourself. You're a son, you're a father, you're a mother, you're an employer, you're an employee, you're a boss, you're this, you're that. Bizarrely, the more altruistic those titles get, the more likely they are to diverge you from self. For me, that was the title doctor. That the whole world wanted to make me feel like that was the most important thing I had accomplished. And this is what gave me value in society. And it's been a long, bumpy 30 years since getting that MD kind of in behind my name to realize it's not the thing. It's not me. I'm something bigger than that. I am something more true than a compilation of somebody else's curriculum and some doctor's title. And when you find that original vibration of this is me, you become very potent. You start to tune to something bigger than the biology would have you believe in. And in that, you start to do something different with your relationship to everything. And that's the 8-point journey that we've put together for the Journey of Intrinsic Health, which is our program that we've been helping answer that question of how do you get to health? These 8 steps are laid out in this 8-week journey. And it's about that change of relationship to your food, to actually water. Water is really kind of backwards as to our understanding of how we hydrate and what water is. And then we also get confused about our breath and our relationship to each little respiration we take. We're confused about what it happens when we fast and what does that paucity of stress on the neurologic system look like. We're confused about exercise. We do exercise kind of backwards as well. And so it's forming the relationship to all of these lifestyle things that you've been told are important. But when you go and do the thing that's important, you don't get healthier. And that was a big question mark for all of us in the medical field. Like, we know people should exercise, and yet when we tell people who are overweight and diabetic to go exercise, they don't actually consistently lose weight, and they very rarely improve their diabetes. Why is that? We know movement is important, and yet it's not working. And I think it's because of this externalization of everything. And so since you're not you and you're this external representation of yourself, your relationship to all these things, food, movement, breath, fasting, the rest, are all backwards as well. And so this is the 8-week journey into the obvious, but in a completely new lens of everything's going to go internal instead of externally sought after. And that's changed a lot of everything. And it's allowed me to close my physical clinic where I was seeing one patient at a time and go to a coaching model where we are witness to the healing process rather than mandating the healing process, rather than the prescriptive process of an MD writing down 8 prescriptions and saying this will make you better, realizing that can never make anybody better because those prescriptions are 8 external, stimuli that have absolutely nothing to do with the root cause of their disease. And so this has been an exciting journey of reversing out of my education and into the realization that there's nothing more beautiful and potent than a human being in their own field, in their own self, in their own original math.
I'd love to dive into some of those 8, if it's okay, because I think identity is such a core one, which you just touched on beautifully there.